Okay, so we started with the contribution analysis and the key elements, and we mentioned the theory of change as a framework. We started also to talk about evidence-based verification. So contribution analysis uses data to confirm whether the theory of change aligns with the reality or needs adjustment. And the idea of evaluation is actually to look if it needs adjustment or not. This process strengthens the contribution claim by identifying gaps in the logic, assumptions, or evidence. And we agreed, it's well understood that it can be used in any phase of policy or program implementation, from planning to ex post phase when it's already implemented. This process strengthens the contribution claim by identifying gaps, logic, assumptions, or evidence. It's an iterative approach, and contribution analysis often is revisiting and refining the theory of change and contribution story based on new evidence gathered during the intervention. So during the intervention, when we are doing an interim evaluation during the implementation period, and during this phase we can get insights what to improve and how to better manage the implementation. So these information coming from interim evaluations are predominantly contributing to the rest of the implementation period for this policy, program, or project, while also when the next cycle is starting, when a new program is being prepared or a policy, then the interim evaluation results are the first information which we have at hand, not the ex post evaluation results. Because we always have to prepare new acts, new documents before the end of the existing one. And in this period, we do not have the ex post evaluation results yet, because they're commonly commissioned a year after the period of implementation has finished, because we need data and we need information to see what the results were and to look at the outcomes. Okay, iterative means also phased. Also, when we are preparing policy documents and programs, it's going in phases, and this iterative approach helps us to have these feedback loops when we need to improve certain steps, and the evaluation when it's going on at the same time while the planning process is going on. You have this back and forth where you can have the contribution from the evaluation feeding into the planning process, and the quality of the final program or policy or project can be improved in that way. And that's the main purpose of the ex ante evaluation. Focus on causal contribution. The contribution analysis does not claim sole causation, and this is important to understand because we have this contextual understanding that things are not happening for themselves within a small box, but it's always connected to the factors surrounding the implementation process. But instead, it explores the intervention's role alongside other influencing factors. So it's taking into consideration all those who are not friends with our politician, but might have a role in the implementation. So I'm joking about the role of the politician, but there is a clear link between the evaluation of policies, programs, and projects which are managed by the public administrations and the organizations within the public administration, while when we are talking about political objectives which are integrated into these documents, and later when we get the results, you have the political influence going on, and it's a contextual information as well. So you have elections, you have changes of political structures which are impacting very much our institutions. The steps in the contribution analysis to define the cause-effect question is the first step. Clarify the issues to be addressed and the outcomes to analyze. develop the theory of change, or reconstruct it. If it's already there, then we have an additional process there. Outline the hypothesized pathways from the intervention to the outcomes, including assumptions and risks. Gather existing evidence, collect data already available on the theory of change and its assumptions. Assess the contribution claim. Evaluate the evidence supporting the theory of change and consider challenges to the claim. So basically we have the theory of change as our main focus around which we are going through the step-by-step process. Collect additional evidence, gather new data from the intervention's implementation to test the theory of change further. So how do we gather additional information? Through reading monitoring reports, interviews, surveys if they are necessary, focus group discussions, and data which is available based on the indicators, systems which are set up around a policy or a program or project in the end. Strengthen to contribute story, refine and reinforce the narrative about how the intervention contributed to the outcomes, addressing gaps and weaknesses. And this is actually our main purpose of the whole process, to see where is room for improvement and in which parts of the implementation process are needed improvements or revisions. A few slides about the theory of change. It is an approach to planning, learning, reflection, and documentation of the change we make as development planners and practitioners. It is a theory in the sense that it represents the best idea we have about how we can support change, and we recognize that these ideas need to be constantly tested and refined so that we can have a stronger theory next time. And it explains why we think certain actions, a project, program, or an organizational strategy, will likely lead to the desired change. So it has different kinds of elements. Sometimes when we are scientists or researchers, when we hear the word theory, we have a different understanding of it than a policy practitioner who is using this word in a sense of structuring a set of evaluative questions around an intervention. So it's not something which we would call a theory in a scientific way of thinking. So it's related to the way how we define a hypothesis about what this intervention will bring us. So in that sense, we do also research work. We ask questions. We have the research question. We propose a hypothesis we want to confirm. In the same way, the theory around an intervention starts with the questions and trying to find the way to the desired change in the different phases of policy management. It's an ongoing process of reflection to explore change and how it happens and what that means for the part we play in a particular context, sector, group of people. It considers a program or project within a wider analysis of how change comes about. It makes us explain our understanding of change, but also challenges us to explore it further. It is often presented in a diagrammatic form with an accompanying narrative summary. And the focus is on what we think will change, not on what we plan to do. So this is the main difference between the logic model, which is basically the intervention logic, like in a project framework, but it's assessing also the risks, assumptions, and the external contextual factors which are influencing the pathways of realizing our objectives, which are set by this intervention. Preconditions, the building blocks of the change process. These are conditions of states of being that must be in place for the change process to be reached, and preconditions must be achieved in order for the next logical task in the change pathway to be achieved. So it's like a skeleton, which we will see now on the next slide. So the pathways, it's a map that explains how we believe the long-term change are brought about by depicting the preconditions of change necessary to achieve the change, and the pathway of change, or the map indicating the link between the preconditions, is the skeleton on which other elements and assumptions and activities are added, and the pathway summarizes the theory of an intervention, but does seldom tell the whole story. And the story we know only if we talk about it and if it's communicated and discussed and later on added as a narrative to the diagram. So it's not just the flow chart which we are creating, but it's how we are using the different aspects of it. The theory of change assumption, they explain why an intervention makes sense in a given time. So you can test the coherence and the consistency of the program or the project. It is something that is accepted as true or likely to happen. They underpin our understanding of how change works and why you believe that the sequence of change will actually influence positive change. And being explicit about our assumptions also helps to identify gaps and unmet needs, including additional necessary activities or actors that should be engaged. So this is more the theory behind the theory of change, but the main purpose of it is to be a very useful tool for evaluating and considering all the different aspects which are necessary for understanding how a policy, a program, or a project is structured and how it's implemented, and what the mechanisms are behind during the implementation process, and all the questions which we ask when we are implementing it and when we are evaluating it can be then linked to the different sequences of the theory of change, and then we know how and in which parts interventions need to be improved or revised. I have added a few slides on the OECD DAC criteria. Is anybody here who has not really heard about the OECD evaluation criteria for international development management? Most of you have heard about it? Okay, I will not go deep in it, just mention the main aspects of it, just to have a clear understanding that these criteria are used internationally from the major international development organizations, but also by the European Union, and through the European Union member states. It entered into the policy regulations for strategic planning or public policy planning in the member states. So we all refer to the OECD DAC criteria. So DAC means Development Assistance Committee, and it's a widely known part dealing with the evaluation processes, and the main criteria: effectiveness, efficiency, impact, relevance, coherence, and sustainability. Well done. Okay, and they're consistent and useful for learning and accountability. This is what I mentioned also earlier. And here just briefly, so I like mostly the relevance criteria, because we always question who was it for, where the beneficiaries and the users really considered, and is the intervention really needed. So this is always linked to the quality analysis, the initial basis before we start to plan an intervention, a program, a project. And if this is done correctly, then the intervention has high probability to be very relevant. If the analysis was not of sufficient quality, if the initial data was not good, then it can happen that the relevance will be suboptimal or not good. Effectiveness, it's a measure which is connected to the objectives, and efficiency is connected to the costs. This is the main difference between the two criteria, and this is how I remember them. Effectiveness, are the objectives reachable? Efficiency, if the costs behind it are in a good manner planned, and are the interventions financed in an optimal way. Okay. Impact, this examines the positive and negative changes. So when we are doing the evaluation, they can always be positive and negative outcomes of the intervention. So we always look for the positive impact, but in the evaluation we find sometimes negative impacts, and this is something which has to be considered as well and explained. Sustainability, it's going broader than the sustainability of a project. When we look at sustainability also in an institutional and political and financial way, then it can be applied also to the policy level and program level. So the environmental aspect of sustainability has to be confirmed, but when we ask who will take care of the results in the future, then the institutional responsibility needs to be clear also up front. Who will take care of the maintenance costs? Will the infrastructure be used in the future, in which way, and so on. Coherence, this criterion examines how well the intervention aligns with other interventions and policies. This is the external coherence. For example, you are defining a national program in a certain policy area. This program needs to be coherent also to the national strategic framework of a country, and also to international regulations, policies, and so on. So this coherence criteria refers to external compliance with other policies and with the hierarchy of planning documents, but there is also internal coherence which we can question through the intervention logic. So if a document is incoherent within itself, it has difficulties with implementation. And this is where the theory of change can help to establish a clearer internal logic and to work on the internal coherence of an intervention document, policy, program, project. Okay. And now we are in the second part of our program, in the second session, and we will go through an example of the realist evaluation on the example of the European Union youth policy, because the two-day conference has to do with youth policies, and in this sense we will have the case study theme throughout our training program connected to this policy. Here I have used AI to help me to prepare a case study on the European Union youth policy on the strategic level, and I was so surprised how helpful it was. Of course, you need to understand the methodology and the key concepts in order to navigate the tool, but it was really helpful, and I was very surprised in a positive sense. You know, we're always a bit, with new technology, a bit reluctant, but the main point is not to use it blindly. So it can give you all sorts of information, but if you put some wrong comments in it, you will get some strange outputs, for example. But if you put the name of a methodology, it will scan all the methodological documents for you. I would probably need a week to read these documents in order to prepare just an overview just of one case. So in that sense, it was really helpful. And of course, if you have already experience with it, you can share it with us, how you use it, and if you want to use it throughout the training program, let's do it together. Let's see how it works. So no, we have no problems with it. I use not ChatGPT, but there are much higher quality AI tools already available. Especially evaluation likes to refer to AI like ALICE, if you have used it. So ALICE is very good for research and for the analytical data. So they have also a component which is for free and which can be paid. So
Can you tell again?
it's AILYZE, ALYZE. And they have also some kind of training programs which are for free to promote this tool. And I know through the European Evaluation Society was already some webinars on that topic, how to use AI in evaluation. It can be really helpful because we are very much crowded by lots of documents and data and so on. So it's a new world now. Okay, so key principles of the realist evaluation. So our theme is the European Union Youth Policy. The first principle is that programs work differently in different contexts. And if we talk about the policy which is covering many countries, we have also multi-country programs and development work. So in that sense, realist evaluation can be useful because you can compare. It assumes that outcomes are not just produced by programs themselves, but by the interaction between the context, the mechanisms, and the outcomes. And it's called CMO configurations. Mechanisms are not the same as activities. Okay, a mechanism is the underlying reasoning or response of participants to the resources or opportunities of which a program offers. Think only of policy, of legislation. A new law is adopted. How many years it takes that this law is being implemented in a comparable way across a country. So you have different regions in a country, different institutional capacities. Some regions are more advanced, some are less advanced. And in this territorial perspective, you can already have a first understanding if a policy is being implemented in an equal way. Legislator assumes that it must be implemented in an equal way. An evaluator will never say this. It will always understand that the contexts differ, the capacities differ, and the contextual factors can have strong influence on the implementation. Culture, history, all invisible factors have something to say here. And this is the difference between activity and mechanism, between the plan and how the plan is being implemented. Focus on causation. Instead of asking only did it work, realist evaluators ask how and why something worked or didn't work. Consider the interplay of context and mechanisms. I have a flashback when I was younger. Whenever I asked why something, people don't like the word why. We are very much working in institutional contexts where things are automized, formalized, standardized. And each player and each stakeholder, each administrator in a system does not need to have the background information why they're doing what they're doing. But whenever you have a problem in the implementation, you will naturally ask, why did this problem occur? And then you talk to representatives of the public administration, and there will always be an reluctance, or anxiety, that they are not. It's not their fault that something is not working, because they are not responsible for why and a task is being on his desk and what the consequences of it. So when you have to look at something in a systemic way, you have to talk to all of them and then see how the processes are functioning. And in many countries which are in transition or which have weaker institutional structures or systems and capacities, will have this problem that people do not really know what they're doing. They're doing it because they're told to do a certain thing. And in that sense, we do have weak institutional structures. And you will have always difficulties with evaluations, finding which are the underlying reasons why something is not working or not. And when you have the truth on the table, then you have to take a diplomacy course. How to communicate the truth to the people who are paying you. So this is something we are experiencing through our work. And for evaluators, it's not uncommon to talk about evaluation anxiety. And it's a topic for research as well. So if you're interested. Steps in realist evaluation: clarify the program theory. What is the intervention supposed to do and how? This involves articulating the assumed CMO configurations, design the evaluation, choose methods, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed, to test the theory in different contexts. Then the third step is to collect data and analyze it, which helps to understand how the mechanisms operate in particular contexts and produce their outcomes, and refine the theory. Update your program theory based on what you have learned about what works and for whom and in what conditions. For us evaluators, because of the principle of independence and objectivity, we have the possibility to see things which people from within the system first do not want to see because of subjectivity reasons. They don't want to be responsible for mistakes, or they are too closely linked because they have created a project. They have worked on a program for their whole life. So it's always good to have this external objective insights into what is being done from an independent evaluator. Refine the theory in the first step. Update your program theory based on what you've learned and what works and for whom and in what conditions. So it's basically the whole process of evaluating, but taking into the consideration the CMO perspective on it. When to use it: in complex interventions with multiple stakeholders, when traditional experimental methods don't capture contextual variation, and when you want deeper insights into causality and implementation processes. So, and then you will end up in institutional analysis, or it's always somehow connected to the system and to the people in it. Here we have now the example of the EU youth policy. The EU youth policy supports young people's social inclusion, education, and employment by providing opportunities for learning, mobility, civic engagement, and skill development. The assumption is if young people are given resources and opportunities, they will become more empowered, employable, and socially active. It's very clearly stated, and it's based on the EU youth policies, EU youth strategy 2019-2027. The CMO approach, now by elements, so by the objectives: youth empowerment through participation. The context: urban area with strong local youth organizations and infrastructure. So the context is the urban area. Okay. The mechanism: youth feel heard, valued, and motivated to engage because of access to EU-funded youth forums and participatory processes. And the outcome: increased civic engagement and youth-led initiatives. For the second, employability through Erasmus plus mobility. The context: unemployed youth in rural areas with limited job opportunities. Mechanisms: participation in Erasmus plus triggers confidence, international exposure, and skill development. And outcome: greater job readiness and employment opportunities through it may be limited by the local job markets. What can happen that we lose even more youth in the rural areas moving to to the markets where jobs are easier got. CMO3, social inclusion via youth guarantee. The context, marginalized youth. Needs not in education, employment and training, with limited trust in institutions. Then the mechanisms, one-on-one coaching builds trust and motivation to engage with education or employment, and outcome, increased uptake of education, training and long-term career planning. Okay, this is the application of the realist CMO configuration on the strategic level. Evaluation questions in the realist style. What aspects of the EU policy works best for which groups of youth, in which contexts and why? How do different mechanisms like motivation, empowerment and skill acquisition contribute to outcomes, likely employment or civic participation? And under what conditions do EU programs lead to unintended outcomes? I mentioned one, this is brain drain, or disengagement, or other. This is an example. So these are the questions. Then the data collection methods, qualitative standards, interviews with youth participants, youth workers and policymakers. It's not enough to talk only to the policymakers. You will have biased information and it always be a very good program. So you always have to look and talk to the main stakeholder representatives to get a better and broader understanding of what is being done. Focus groups in different EU regions to see also how the policy is being territorially implemented in the different parts of Europe. Case studies of successful and unsuccessful initiatives. So we do not learn only from the best practices, but also from the mispractice or bad practices as well. Quantitative surveys on employment status, civic engagement or education outcomes. Here we rely very much also on the data sets, on the indicators which we need to monitor the implementation of the strategy and the programs and the projects which are funded and through it. Comparative analysis of program uptake and outcomes across different countries or regions. So these methods are used in a mixed form based on an evaluation plan. Based on the questions you define, you decide which methods are most useful to get answers to your questions, and then you prepare an evaluation design matrix based on the methods and the evaluation questions. Refining the theory. Data, here this is a typo. As data is gathered, we may find that some mechanisms work only in certain contexts. And there we get the contextual aspect very much into picture, and we see then if other factors are influencing the implementation of a policy which is designed in the same way but has different outcomes because of the different contexts. Example refinement, civic engagement increases only when youth feel they can influence decisions and when there is local political support. So when youth can influence decisions means that ownership is created. And this is a precondition also for building trust. On the other hand, if the local political elites do not like that the youth is receiving EU funding for their projects, then there can be a lack of political support because of certain political orientations which are against EU membership, for example. And this can very much influence the success of the implementation of the strategy, the programs and the projects funded through it. Adjust the theory to say EU programs work best in promoting youth participation when local governance is open and accessible. And there you open another door towards advocacy, raising awareness about the importance of the interaction between youth and democratic processes and developing democratic culture, for example. Realist evaluation plan, EU youth policy. So the evaluation title would be Understanding What Works in the EU Youth Policy, a realist evaluation of youth empowerment and inclusion. And the purpose of the evaluation to understand how and why EU youth policy initiatives like Erasmus+, Youth Guarantee, EU Youth Dialogue contribute to youth empowerment, employability and civic participation, for whom they work best and under what circumstances. And the evaluation objectives are to identify key mechanisms through which EU youth policy interventions operate. So the mechanisms, then the contextual, how contextual factors influence outcomes, and test and refine an initial program theory using the CMO configurations, and provide policy recommendation based on realist findings. I mentioned AI in the beginning. So when we do not know what is AI using as a background material, by combining this evaluation plan for the European Union youth policy, it can use different sources, and they will probably not specify was it an ex ante and interim evaluation of the same policy, or was it a policy of just one element of the youth policy. AI is using the available information. And this is a disclaimer now for this training. It's a hypothetical case, because we cannot confirm if this is generated on documents like we will distribute later in the afternoon for the group work tomorrow. But you will then check, and you can, when you will go through your group work outcomes, because you will use the actual evaluation documents, which are short. It's not too much reading, but it will be just for understanding the tools and methods, and also test how the AI has prepared our case study for the realist evaluation. Okay, just a few more slides. Youth policy further, initial program theory. The EU youth policy empowers young people by offering opportunities for education, mobility, participation and support. If young people are provided with the theory behind the hypothesis, like in our diploma papers, if young people are provided with tailored opportunities and support, they will become more socially included, employable and civically engaged. And the research questions, what are the key mechanisms? And this is a repetition of what I've said before. And let's go to the next slide. The 3 steps and the realist evaluation approach. So the initial theory, review EU policy documents, academic literature, it's the desk work when we do evaluations, and program logic models, conduct interviews with the EU policymakers and youth program coordinators. It's the qualitative research. Then the data collection for the quantitative part of the research, methods which we can use like semi-structured interviews, focus groups, document analysis and surveys. The target groups are different than across the different methods we use, because we will use surveys when we have many people to communicate with. So we collect their responses, and it's the easiest to do an online survey, for example. Then for the document analysis, we do it on our desks. The focus groups, after we have conducted the surveys and the interviews, it's good to organize focus groups with a selected group of people, which can be useful in the verification of the analytical findings, and which can give credibility to the evaluation. I sometimes go in the focus groups with the aim to jointly write up the recommendations. So I don't do it as one smart person from the outside. I do it with the people around the table, and then they give credibility to what we are then communicating to the administration which has commissioned the evaluation. And then we get a good interaction, and it's some kind of triangulation as well. And the third step is the analysis of the data and how we are using then the method of context mechanism and outcome patterns. Compare cases across different regions, if we have this regional or territorial perspective. Also, if We have urban and rural youth, how they are targeted, and we saw it in the objectives that there are different measures for the urban youth and for the rural youth. Okay. And here we are now with a small exercise. We have enough time. And because we're digital, but not entirely digital, we have post-its. And it's just to have an initial exercise to sort these findings here, or elements of the logic model and the theory of change, into the components. They're just sorted by alphabetically, but they should actually fit into each part based on the way how they're formulated. And this is also an important insight when you're creating a logic model or a theory of change. These short statements have to be sufficiently clear to understand if it's an activity, an output, an input, or an outcome, a longer term, medium term, or short term. So in that sense, it's an exercise based on the youth policy. We have people here for 2 groups, and we will work in a way that you use the post-its for each finding. You split, you do teamwork. Not everybody needs to write them all up, but use, I don't know, a column or how you want to. And write up also on each post-it one of the logic model components.